All right, I got all 10 hoses off. I don't know when the last time that thing saw grease. Yeah, baby, leverage. So this is what it looks like when your main gland seal disintegrates. Piston rebuilt. Yeah, that was awesome. It's like delayed going into second. There we go. Oh, these are supposed to be dry clutch setups. All that is water. The clutch is not disengaging. We're gonna dump it in here. It's moving. Let's see if we can tension this thing up. 3.5. Yeah, that is significantly tighter than it was. It died on me. All right, so I've been diving in trying to figure out why I kept having issues with the engine sputtering. And I came in, and there was a big old leak right underneath. Put this pig mat down, but right in that area was a big old leak. But I started getting under there looking for drips and stuff, and there's quite a bit of wet under there. So right here is a fuel line, and it's a hard line to this point. From right about there, all the way over to the primer pump right here is a rubber line. I am worried about the fact that it's leaking here. So let's see if I can... Oh, it just slips off. Look at that. That line quite literally just came off. So I bet we're sucking a ton of air right there. So yeah, and it looks like right here, this looks totally like the hard line was cut right there, and then they stuck this in here to replace it. So they basically probably had something rust out or break, and in order to get it back running again, they just stuck a chunk of rubber hose from there to that primer pump, which I'm not gonna really be overly concerned about it. I am gonna tighten that. So let's get, it looks like there's enough room. I could put a couple different hose clamps on that and tighten it. Let me grab a couple, and we're gonna go that route for now. So I added this hose clamp here, and this one was extremely loose. We're gonna give this one a good tighten, and maybe, just maybe, this is where we're losing our prime. I'm hoping so. We'll have to figure out if that actually fixes it or not. I do think I want to replace that whole line, but before I do that, we're gonna try it and just see. But right this second, we're not gonna do that. Hopefully at least that fixes the leak. One of these bolts for the valve cover is seized and broke off. I've got the injector lines, they actually bolt here. They're disconnected, so everything's disconnected except for this one bolt. I'm hoping I can get it loose. I guess I didn't tell you what we're doing. Welcome back. We're working on the baby bulldozer here. So this is my 1970s Caterpillar D3. I think it's technically a D3 LGP, and LGP stands for low ground pressure. So the low ground pressure essentially is the wide tracks. These have like 24-inch wide tracks, and so it makes it a very, very good dozer for going in soft or muddy areas, because the ground pressure is much lower because the surface area that touches the ground on this tractor, or area to spread out the weight. We're working on the engine. I'm going to dive into some electrical. We've got some other things to button up, and got to figure out, there's a fuel issue going on, a few different things we're going to jump into in this video. right now, I'm gonna try and get the valve cover off because I've never had it off and I kind of want to see underneath it. There we go, that's a little bit loose. I might have to drill it out. All right, so here's what we got going on. All the bolts for the valve cover out, but this one here broke. It literally didn't even have a chance. I tried a few different things. So it's stuck in there, and it's this side of the valve cover, it is actually loose and free, but this won't come out. So I think I'm gonna take a small drill bit, drill it down in there, and try and get it loosened up, at least through the aluminum portion of the valve cover. I think what happened is when you have dissimilar metals, aluminum being the valve cover and the actual bolt was steel, there is a good chance or a larger chance that you're going to have some sort of a corrosion between those two things that actually binds it up. I see that a lot on all these old machines. So let's find a drill bit, see what we can do to fix that. I gotta start with a smaller one. I think I cracked it. I did. Dang it. There we go. RTV. Oops. Alright, so it doesn't look terrible in here. A little bit of tiny surface rust. And then there's all this RTV from gluing the gasket down. Here's our broken stud. Well, bolt. So at least there's enough I can get something on, try and get that out. I bet it was just seized in the aluminum. I bet if I clean that up a little bit, I could probably just back that out with a pair of vice grips. But this purple wire here goes to the glow plug circuit. So that's through this little stud there to this wire. And I can see that one's not even attached to its glow plug. That one is barely attached. That one's not attached. So basically they've got these little plastic things that pop down on there, and something is not doing the popping, so it's not snapping down on there and staying. It's probably because these are old. You can see them down in there. Nothing ridiculous under here. It doesn't look bad. Obviously I cannot see the valve seat from up here. See if it's stuck open, but we could run it with this open and kind of see if I've got a bunch of extra oil maybe there. I guess it wouldn't actually show us up here. So yeah, we might have to take off the actual exhaust manifold. All in all though, good to see it's nice and clean under here. Could probably get the valves adjusted at some point, but for now I just kind of wanted to see what we saw under here, see if anything looked majorly wrong, but nothing really does, other than wanting to get these glow plug wires on there and kind of connect those a little bit better. I do know that when I use the glow plugs to start this machine, it starts so much better. I still have an issue though with having to start it with 24 volts, and I believe a lot of my problem is right here in this connection. There's a ton of corrosion in there, and I believe we're losing a lot of power, of amps right there. Probably gonna put the valve cover back on. I did crack it a little bit, but there's enough meat. It should be able to still make a good solid connection. I do have the piece. We could braze it back on. I am not buying another valve cover. So I do think I want to get a new valve cover gasket. Although this one doesn't look like it's been leaking. But I do think I want to get a new one. Although, yeah, it actually might be leaking right there. Right under there. Try some big vice grips. Yeah, it's moving. Good. There we go. Telling you, it's always between the dissimilar metals on these old tractors. It definitely was not in the steel to steel connection, at least on that one. I got it on 12 volts directly to the starter. Let's see if it starts on 12. Still doesn't want to. Let's open up this dashboard so we can get to the electrical. Hasn't been opened in a minute. One little wasp nest. And I'm not sure what that thing is. Some corroded wires, but doesn't look too bad in here. The oil pressure gauge is one of those plastic tubes. I hate those. They crack. A couple lights that are burnt out. At least that one is. That one looks burnt out too. Temp, converter temp, amps, hour meter with 0 hours on it, engine oil pressure, and that's got to be water temp. Then there's some sort of a reset button right there, and that is your key switch to have glow plugs and then start the engine. And I'm not sure what this does. Oh, that's probably for lights. I think it says lamp. All right, I'm tearing into this wiring behind the basically firewall here, right on the engine side. And just trying to get an idea of what is corroded. So this block here is essentially there so you can unhook quickly the electrical from the dash side if you're going to pull the engine out. And so if I pull it apart, you can see that terminal is completely corroded and missing. This one's got corrosion all over it. The broken terminal that's missing is right in there. It basically broke off. This one here has pulled out. And you can tell because it's sitting a little higher than that one. I'm going to eliminate any of the wires that are garbage. Then we're going to basically cut this here and there. Or if I ever have a need to take the engine out, I'll just cut the wires and we can do like a Scotch lock or find, not a Scotch lock, I hate those things. We can do a Deutsch connector or something like that to be able to create a plug right here. But for right now, I just want to see if we can make it a little bit better so that we don't lose voltage, and hopefully we can get it so that it'll start with 12 volts, not 24. And I honestly, a lot of the gauges aren't working, so I'm hoping some of this corrosion is part of it. All right, so see this white wire here. It's not hooked to anything. It was white, now it's kind of faded, but it comes up and it goes through this connection here. And then behind the dash, it's this wire here. So somebody basically disconnected it from whatever and just has it zip tied, not being used back here, which means there's probably a problem with that. And I think that was probably the signal wire, because the replacement wire is this blue wire here, which is on the starting switch, and it is on the side of the starting switch that you would turn to basically get ignition. So if we follow that blue wire down, it's outside of the loom, and it comes to this. So they installed a way to disconnect it, and then down here there's a black wire that goes to the starter right there, to the starter solenoid, and it's just one of these crimp connectors. And so we may be losing voltage right there. We may be losing voltage to this connection here. That wire, this red one, it is corroded and broken right at that wire loom. Right there, just notice that. Right by my finger, you can see the things are, yeah, see? You can peel off that coating real easily. And there's corrosion right in there. So I need to figure out what that red wire is. I thought that red wire was signal power, but I don't think it is now. It is 12 volts coming right off the battery. So if that's 12 volts coming right off the battery, and then that red one, let's see. So that red one comes over here to a, looks like a little breaker. And then that breaker then has another red wire which comes over to the amp gauge. So, and then across the amp gauge, then we get orange. And then orange jumps up over to the start switch. And then it goes back out the orange. And then orange probably leads over here. Okay, so then it leads to the alternator. So, I think I'm thinking about this backwards with red and orange and what supplies what, but I'm just kind of trying to trace the wires. And then over here, we have another little breaker. And I don't exactly know what that thing is. Oh, it's a switch. Okay. For lights. All right. So that light switch looks like it's hooked to these two dash lights, and they don't work because they're currently burned out, but I can get new bulbs for those. So these two little wires are the wires that go to the dash lights, and then I'm betting this green wire is probably a ground. It's just a guess. So, but power for them comes through this orange wire, which jumps over here, and then the other side of it, let's see, this other little orange wire, where is it? It goes to this oil pressure switch. Okay. And it's got a brown wire, and that's this one, this little one outside that connector. I gotta figure out where it goes. Just a tedious kind of process, and there's not many wires on this thing. It's not all that complicated. You got an alternator, you got a starter, and you've got some sensors. And this thing, at this moment, the only lights it has on it is those two dash lights. So all the wires are essentially for starting, charging, or for the gauges, and then a little bit for these lights. This machine is super, super simple. I mean, compared to the majority of machines, this thing has no wires, and I like that. So at some point, we may get to a point where we're going to put some lights on it, etc., but we'll add those at a different time. Right now, let's just get this kind of wired right, get this simplified, and we'll go. We've chased a few things down, got a few things to snip, a few things to clean up, a few different connections to eliminate. So I'm going to keep working on that, and then I'll bring you back when I've got more figured out. All right, so I got a jump pack hooked up back there, and we're just going to check some voltage here. So right here is where the main 12 volts comes into the starter. So we've got 12.82 volts there, and then it's got this little wire that leads up to the dash. If I jam it in this section, that's basically got 12.82 volts there. So then what we're going to do, let's go up here. Right here is where power comes in. Got 12.84 volts there. Then we jump to the other side. Same voltage there, 12.84. And then this red wire jumps way over here, where we have the same voltage, 12.84. It jumps over to the starting, to the key, to right here, where we have 12.85 volts, because somehow we're charging. And then this blue wire, when we turn the key, that blue wire sends power down here to the solenoid through this connection right there. All right, so we're going to connect that lead right there. So I'll turn the key, and we'll see what voltage we get being sent to the starter. And really, the starter won't turn because we're disconnected from the starter. This is just the lead that gets power from the start switch. 9.7, 9.6. So that tells me for sure that's why we're getting the slow starting on 12 volts. So this wire is either junk, which I'm going to replace it. We're actually going to step up to a, I've got some, what is this, 8 gauge? 8 gauge. So 8 gauge. And I think that is what I'm going to replace that start wire with. The other issue we could be having is there might be some major corrosion inside that key switch. So the other thing is maybe these little connectors on the outside are dirty as well. Everything back here is all dirty. So I really do need to go in and clean up every one of these electrical connections, wipe them down, and put some dielectric grease on there to keep corrosion from happening again. But I'm not going to mess with that this second. So yeah, let's see if we can get better voltage coming out of that start switch down to the starter so that we don't have to keep cranking this thing on 24 volts when it really should only need 12. All right, let this wire kind of run through, and then I've got a little tail that's going to go up into the dash, but I think we're going to cut it about right here for now. And I know this 8 gauge, it's way over duty, way too big, but I might as well try it. And I don't know, is there any harm in actually having a wire that's too big in this instance? I know sometimes there are issues with that, but I can't think of one. So if you've got a little more electrical knowledge than I do and you'd like to share that with me, I'd appreciate it. I'm always open to learning more from you guys because honestly, I've learned so much from you guys throughout the years. So as always, I really do appreciate it. So I am going to, for now, crimp this onto the other end, and then we can put that to the switch, and we'll try it with the switch, and we'll see what power we get at this spot. All right, so I've got this electrical terminal crimper, and it's got a bunch of different dies. Dies meaning the different size crimps that you can put a different wire size or wire connector through. I think I should be able to get away with this one. It'll certainly work for right now. Yep, that definitely is our start wire. It's labeled on that switch. So let's grab this. Whoa. Let's get that back up. My board go. Okay. Let's get the meter on it and see what happens. All right, here we go. Got it hooked to the wire. Let's see. Turn the switch. And we're getting 10 volts. About the same. Maybe a little bit more. Key switch has issues. Not the wire. Okay. Well, now we know. So now that we know that we're losing voltage in this switch, let's open it up. There's 3 small screws that I should be able to take this back cover off, and maybe, just maybe, we'll find some corrosion in there. And if we do, which is what I'm expecting, I'm betting we could clean it up. They don't make this style of switch, at least not that I can find. And so I'd have to switch to a different kind. Not that it's that big a deal, but I do prefer to fix stuff rather than replace it if I can. Doesn't always work out that way, but... So I've got all these marked. Okay, there's one. That one's loosening. Okay, good. That one's loosening. Drum roll, please. Sweet. All three are loosening. And I'm betting I probably have to take these off as well. There we go. So taking that off, 2 of the bolts broke. Those 2, so there's still some bolt left in there, which is awesome. All right, let's check this out. Not as bad as I thought it would be. Yeah, there's one of the brokens right there. The other one, there's still a little bit hanging on top. I might be able to get it with some pliers. Looks like they do go through, so I could possibly drill it. Doesn't look too bad, honestly. I mean, a little bit of stuff on this little Y piece, but no real corrosion. So this is where you stick the key thing in and turn it. And one direction goes to heat for the glow plugs, and then the other direction goes to start. Well, I'll get this cleaned up and we'll put it back together and see what we see. All right, so we're going to chop these up. And this white wire, I pulled it out from the dash. We're going to eliminate it completely just so there's no confusion. All those wires rejoined back together. Eliminated that white one. I found out this little green guy here, he basically just goes to, that would be switched external lights. So on the dash, there's a light switch for the dash lights, and you pull it out a second time, and it would turn on any auxiliary lights. So when we go to add additional lights, maybe for the front, we'll use that. I went ahead and down here, put some shrink tubing and cleaned up the ends of all these cables, cut this one where it was broken, and put a new ring terminal on that, spliced in our new ignition switch wire, which is that little guy right there. That goes to the key switch. Cleaned up pretty much every single terminal, added dielectric grease to a lot of them, and every single ground I took off, cleaned, and put back on. I'm still getting very little voltage to the starter. It just kind of, and so either the battery cables are bad, which is very, very possible. Possibly, maybe one of these wires is got some resistance in it due to being corroded inside, or we have an issue with the starter. I'm kind of leaning toward the starter as an issue. I mean, that start switch, inside it, it did not look dirty, and so I don't think that is our issue. So I'm kind of leaning toward something's going on with the starter itself. All right, so let's see if the battery pack will actually turn this thing over fast enough. I'll show you. Well, I don't think it's gonna, but got 12 volts hooked up. I did clean up the ends, and I replaced the end on the positive, added some red tape so we can mark it, but I put a different end and I cut that lead back a little bit, so it should be making better contact. Let's find out if we crank fast enough. Nope. All right, so I have an idea, and that idea is that there's no ground wire that actually goes to the starter. There's this is the main positive lead that comes off the battery. So there's this wire, this is the main ground. It goes right to this, so the back of the case here. And from here, there's another ground wire that goes to the transmission case right there. And then there's another wire that jumps down from there and goes over to the engine block. But there's nothing that actually grounds the starter motor itself to the engine block, other than it being mounted in the bell housing, which is normally enough. But I'm kind of wondering if we should have a wire, a ground strap, going to that starter, to one of the bolts. So let's dive under here. I found one that I think is going to work. Let's get that put in, and then we'll see if it makes any difference. All right, so there's the bottom of the starter right there. And you can see this little guy, this little line, this little wire right there. I've got it to the bottom of that bolt, and it's a shorty here. And this is just one I had laying around. I cleaned up the ends of it, and I bent it so that now right there is the wire that goes from the transmission over to the engine. And so it's a ground wire. It's really hard to show you that one. But my thought is we'll pull this bolt out, because I had taken this out, cleaned up the grounds, cleaned up that end. But like I said, there was no connection from the motor to the transmission case. So hopefully I can get that to fit in there. So in a lot of machines, they don't have a ground strap that goes to the starter itself. Usually it gets its ground through the case, but yeah, that's gonna work. Man, that line, this wire is like made for it. And I just had it bouncing around in my battery wire drawer. It's like perfect. Really had to put some shrink tubing on that. But let's just see if this even does anything for us. All right, that's guten tight, which is German for really loose. Ready? There we go. Yeah! Awesome! That is fast enough to crank this thing to get it started. Here are the light bulbs out of the dash for the little baby dozer here. Let's see if we can find something that will fit in there. So these are kind of like little short. So these are going to be too tall. Those look right. Definitely looks like those bulbs. A couple different kinds here. Alright, so I got this whole electrical panel all cleaned up. You know, got the rust and the corrosion off it all. I got the hour meter to work. This oil pressure sensor is essentially how the hour meter gets power. So once this sees oil pressure here, it closes this switch and then sends power over to the hour meter. It was actually wired wrong. Ground wire was on the positive side, and the power wire, the orange one, was on the negative side. And so whenever they replaced it, which they certainly did, because it's got 0 hours on it, and that 0.1 is 1 hour that I ran it once I just pulled it out and tested it. And then I've got this product, it's called Corrosion X, and supposedly kills corrosion, safe on electronics. We're going to spray it on some of these electrical connectors. It's supposed to kind of eliminate the corrosion, but also protect future corrosion from starting, and all this electrical I don't really want any corrosion on, so we'll give it a shot. Got two different light bulbs I'm going to try. One is got one single filament in there, and the other one has two. And I don't know if both filaments in the double illuminate at the same time, or if it's like a high-low. Doesn't look like it's a high-low. It doesn't have multiple terminals. So my thought is with the double would be that it's brighter. We'll find out. So there's the two lights. All right, they got to get there. Oh, shoot. Careful. Careful, careful. All right. All right, so to be able to get this to work, you actually have to have it touching, see? You have to get it to touch, because that's how it gets its ground. So that one is our single filament, and that's our double. And that single filament is way brighter. That's actually quite surprising to me. All right, so I'm gonna put the single filament one in there. All right, we'll just kind of do a little of this. So our key switch ended up working fine. So that's awesome. Totally counterintuitive to spray wires, but it'll work or it won't. A couple of these bottom bolts down here they weren't there. And there was a nest, little mud dauber nest in each of them. Cleaned it out and tapped them. And we'll install it right. I even found some old cat bolts. I like cat bolts, they're really well made, especially the old ones. And this dash, this never worked right. It would never close, it would jam. So that's awesome. And I think it was because this bottom was just so flapping down there that you could never open and close this cover, which is great. Well, I don't know if the actual water temp sensor is actually working. So I pulled out the actual probe that goes into the actual water pump there. And so I warmed up this water. We're gonna stick this in here. We're gonna go check the gauge. Stick that there. See if we get any movement. So it's this one right here. So that's our water temp. And over here we've got the converter oil temp. I can't see it moving. Maybe I didn't get the water hot enough. All right, I warmed it up some more. Looks like our needle is moving. So it was down below the bottom of the green. My only worry is that it's not going to be moving enough. So if it starts to fail and become inaccurate, and as you can see, it's steaming. If it's not telling me that it's going to get too hot ever, then it'll just always be in the green. And if it's always in the green, I'll never really know what the temperature actually is. Oh, I might replace that. Oil pressure and water temp are very important. The converter temp, I don't know if that works either. I do know the amp gauge works. I do know the hour meter works. And I know the oil pressure works. I'm going to dig around and see what kind of water temp gauges I've got, and we'll go from there. All right, so I've got the thermal camera out. The hottest spot in that water is 188 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's essentially kind of right where that probe is at. So 188 degrees, and we're only showing at the very bottom of the thermostat's dial, basically the gauge. I would think it would be further that way. Further closer, not necessarily to the red, but maybe in the middle. That is a cat gauge. It does... All these other ones are not. Well, maybe they are. They've all got cat part numbers. Yeah, I could be wrong here, but I'd rather be safe than sorry. Found this water temp gauge, and I've got the water heated back up again. And we're, I don't know, 180 something again, maybe 190. But that is a little bit more what I wanted to see. And yet this has barely moved. So I don't know if I want to trust this. Do I want this kind of gauge with no temperature? Or do I just want to go to a kind that actually has the temperature itself? You watch Farmcraft 101. John over there has a D3, very similar to mine actually. And he had to fabricate and build the belly pan for the nose here, for basically the engine cover. This is what it should look like from the factory. Obviously, he did an awesome job building his. His doesn't have the hook like the factory ones do. But I need to get this down because there's a bunch of gunk in it, and I think that there's a leak around the bottom of the engine. I'm not sure where it's coming from. So let's pull this off and uncover all the goodies that are in it. Alright, so I've got all the bolts out but these front two. I need to go get a jack and get my body out of here because I don't really want this coming down on me. And I can get these two from the front over here. There, we got all the bolts out. I'll go let the jack out. We'll see what we see. Got it. There's our skid plate for the front. I don't know if I can get it under here or not. Let's find out. These bolts out of the way. If it's gonna fit, it's gonna be barely. Nope. So I need to start it and lift it, or I need to drag it out the back. All right, got this strap here, hooked to that hook. Significantly less in that belly, that front pan than I was expecting, which is good. I had taken off, this is the belly pan that goes in the middle, and this thing was just chock full of stuff. It had all kinds of goodies and treasures in it. No 10mm wrenches though, because this thing may be made in Japan, but it is all standard. You can pretty much take apart this machine with a 3/4 inch, 9/16, 1/2 inch, and maybe 7/16 and get just about everything. A couple bigger fittings on some of the lines, but most everything you can do with just those wrenches. So let's go down there real quick and we'll take a look at the belly. All right, as you can see, it's all oily, but what really is concerning me is this wet oil. Over here it's more dried, so it's been there a minute. But I'm seeing wet, it's kind of moist right around there, but definitely dripping on that bolt. It's on that bolt, it's on the drain plug. So I initially thought maybe the drain plug was leaking, but now I'm seeing it's coming from higher. There's the oil cooler looks like way up there. I don't know if you can see it way up there. The oil cooler, it looks like that's where it's starting from. So I'm not exactly sure where, but at least we know. There's a little line or a little hose right there on the oil cooler that I need to replace. Got that. And then there's another one that I'm going to replace as well. But this fan belt's going to get replaced. We are going to do a service, get all the oils and filters. But we're going to get all this cleaned up. Probably get the steam cleaner on this thing. Before I tear into it too far, I kind of want to get it all cleaned up. But it's looking pretty good. The engine mounts look pretty good. Up here, the rear mounts do not look good. And they are, you can't see them well from down here. I'd have to show you from the top. But that's the transmission. There's its drain plug. There's the bell housing. And then here's the drive shaft that goes from the torque converter / transmission over into the bevel gear housing. Definitely looks pretty good in that down here. There's not a lot of real major issues. Lots of oil, but that's just preserving this old dog. Something's definitely going on near the injection pump. I now know why there was a huge chunk of like built up oil and grease around the injection pump here. Right where the throttle shaft goes in, there's a seal, and you can see it, that green and gray seal. Fuel is pouring out of there. Man down. All right, we got the key. Now we can get that seal out of there and replace it. Looks fairly new, so I'm kind of wondering if maybe there's other issues with this governor here, but we're going to start with the seal. Got it. All right, so there's our new seal. Here's the old one. And other than where I drilled through it to get the slide hammer in there, it doesn't look bad. The spring is broken in there, and I don't know if maybe that was already broken, because it looks like it's broken opposite of where I drilled the hole. I drilled the hole down here, and the spring's broken up top, which maybe that spring letting go made it so that the seal wasn't quite as tight as it should be. I don't know. This is probably a pretty common problem. I know Farmcraft 101 had to do the same thing on his. I did have to go in, and there were some burrs. You can kind of see them a little bit in there on that shaft. And I went in with some real fine sandpaper and some files and kind of smoothed out that bit as much as I possibly could without taking the shaft out. I don't want to disassemble it right now. We end up having to dive into this thing further later. You know, we can polish that shaft up and get it real nice. But for now, this is a pretty cheap seal. We're just going to get it installed. I'm going to put a little grease on the shaft itself and a little bit on that rubber. The socket fits perfect. We'll drive it in with that. Good enough for me. So we'll just have to keep an eye on it and make sure it's not going to be leaking all the time on us, because that whole thing was just covered in stuff before. The other thing is the throttle itself, it doesn't really get high enough. It doesn't seem to me. So even when it's all the way forward, I go all the way, so basically full throttle. So if we come down here and we look at this, it's on full throttle. There's like a little bit of slop in that pin. First off, the pin has become half of a pin. See that? See how much is worn out? So we got to replace that. Pretty sure I've got some of those laying around. The other problem is, as you can see, the hole that the pin goes through is egged out. So we could drill it larger and bush it. I think I can weld it. I might try and just weld it, fill it in, then re-drill the hole. But I know that pin is going to take up quite a bit of slack, just replacing that and getting the right diameter through there. But the problem was that when I went to give it full throttle, it would never go all the way because there was slack in this pin and in this hole. So let's see if we can get these two things sorted out. All right, see what I got for pins. All right, so I've got a lot of smaller pins in this one, so I think we'll start here. That one looks almost identical. Same length, same hole size. So a lot of this stuff I just kind of collect here and there. And you know, I'll find a pin there, I'll find a pin here, a few here. And then I create a spot for it. And those places allow me the ability to then have stuff on hand later. So it does take some work to have a spot for stuff. But I strongly believe that if you can't find it, it's not worth owning. And so if you have a spot where you can put similar like things like I've created here, and this is just what I have at the cave. I've got a whole nother setup like this at the other shop. You're better prepared to be able to handle a situation where you need something as simple as a tiny little pin. No need to go to the store. We can make one of these work. And you know, it didn't cost me anything. At least it didn't cost me anything right now. It cost me the time to organize it. It cost me the time to find it and put it in here. But that's a small trade-off, in my opinion, for the ability to be knee-deep in a project and not have to leave every time you need a little piece of hardware. So that's just my thought. I could see it both ways. Some people just absolutely would hate this, and I personally, this is just how I operate. So let's take these over there. I think we're going to go get the welder out, see if we can't weld that thing all the way back up and drill it out. Alright, there we go. Now we can punch a new hole through it. Should be better than it was. If I don't break it. Well, that's not sharp. I think I hardened it. Let's see if we can temper it back. Alright, so I'm pretty sure this might be cast steel, and I just welded steel to cast steel, and it probably hardened. So I've got a way harder drill bit now. There we go, we're getting somewhere. Getting close. There we go. Got our pilot hole through. Now I had some other hard, like this one with another cobalt bit. Broke that bit. Definitely hardened it. Alright, I came up to the other shop. I've got some better drill bits and end mills and everything. We're going to try this guy. Boom. No slop at all. Somehow it became a little magnetic. So now hopefully this will be hard enough that it won't wear. Just the pin will wear out. And I'm totally good with that. Way better than that oblong hole we had. So let's head back down and get this part put back in. There we go. There's our part. I went ahead and painted it. Had some cat yellow laying around, so already got the key in there. Let's see if we can slide this on. Sometimes with parts like this, it is nice to have like a wedge. So these are a couple metal wedges that I can hopefully stick in here and get that to spread some. And then in doing so, I can get it closer. Maybe not. I found pretty much an identical pin. That's what it should look like. Man, that is rock solid now. No play at all. Awesome. And I painted the bolt too. The little copper anti-seize on this. Alright, check this out. So, I've got this. This is the throttle cable. It basically goes up to that little linkage right there. I've got it extended all the way out as far as it is currently adjusted to. And before, we had play from about like right here to like that. And so there was a ton of play. So it wasn't getting all the way throttle. So now, if I push this, where'd my pin go? If I put this pin in, it won't go in literally all the way out. It goes in, which is awesome. So that's definitely going to solve the issue of us not getting all the throttle that we need up there and out of the actual governor. So that is absolutely great. If you want all throttle, you want it to basically hit the bump stop, hit the actual limiter in there. And we weren't getting that. So there's a leak right back here. It's above the oil cooler, behind it, below and behind the fuel primer pump, and definitely below the injection pump. It's like a little connector pipe. I can barely even see it myself, so it's hard to show you. But right here, there's a little rubber line that goes from the water pump to this oil cooler. And then there's a little rubber 90 that goes from the oil cooler through the oil cooler back to the block. So I need to find that 90. I do have a new piece for right here. This lower radiator hose and the upper radiator hose, we're going to replace both those. I'm kind of just going to replace all the rubber, because one thing that does go wrong on a machine that sits for a long time is the rubber degrades. Same with the belt. I got a new belt for it. So to even get that changed, or the elbow out, or the lower radiator hose, we need to get the coolant drained. So right here below the radiator, we've got a drain plug right there. So I'm going to pull that, and we're going to get it draining. All right, turns out there's our drain plug. Well, I put the impact on it, at least this one. I didn't put the big dog because I don't want to break it. So, and it won't come out. So I'm kind of like, do I mess? Do I not mess? I'm thinking I leave it and we just pull the lower radiator hose because it'll essentially give me the same thing. Plus we need to take that anyway, and I don't want to cause a problem there. Now I did notice here, that rubber line, what does that go into? Is that a hydraulic tank? There's these two big, what look like hydraulic lines going into the bottom of the radiator. And then there's our lower rad hose there. This is an overflow tube from the top of the radiator. Let's have an oil cooler on the front. I don't see one. That could be a hydraulic oil cooler, and it might have another set of fins as part of the radiator. So, I don't know. Let's just take the lower rad hose off. Oh, another thing I just noticed. I think our front main seal is leaking. It's probably a cause of a lot of this oil here. So that is something I should address. Doesn't look like it's too bad of a job, so long as getting that pulley off is not a nightmare, and it might be. Hope I don't have to pull the radiator to get that off. Well, and then I can kind of show you right up there. There is all the way at the top, there's like a hex nut right above the tip of the light, and it goes into some like compression fitting tube, and I believe that nut is either loose or whatever seal it's got is not doing its job to the best of its ability. And so to get that seal or whatever it is tightened, it's going to be a bunch of work. I'm really trying to go after all the leaks. The other leak down here is on the output shaft seal for this transfer case gear. So right there, that seal leaks. So I've got that seal on order. We're going to replace that. So right here is the primer pump for the injection pump. If you run out of fuel, you use that to prime up the injection pump injectors. And right below it, there's a banjo bolt. And this is the banjo that goes from the fuel tank into this priming pump. It goes then from this priming pump back over to this fuel filter, right way over here. And then from that fuel filter, it then comes into the injection pump right here. So right in this banjo bolt, there's a screen. And you can see it right there. Well, if we flip it over, it's completely clogged with junk right there. So I need to get that clean. And then looking right in here, I don't know how well I'm going to be able to show you, but it is pretty clogged with junk right there too, right at the inlet here. And so at one point in time, this was a hard line that went back to a union back by the transmission. It probably rotted somewhere and they cut it and made a soft line from then forward. I added these 3 clamps to try and basically make it so that it wouldn't lose prime. I think this screen threads out. There's little flat spots there, so we could unthread that, get it all clean, get all the junk out of it. The way this works is the fuel has to flow through that screen up into the middle and then from the middle out. And it was getting clogged. That's why we were losing fuel. Well, at least one of the reasons. Need to drain the coolant. Got a few things to do. There's our lower rat hose. All right, we drained the coolant so I could get the oil cooler off. This is the engine oil cooler, and that's this guy right here. And it essentially goes right in there where you see those two holes on the block, right there and there. So what I'm doing here is I am chasing a leak. Something back behind, so this is the priming pump. The actual priming pump for the injection pump is here, so I took that off. To even get that off, I had to get the oil cooler off. This tube here is one of the water tubes that goes from the oil cooler into the block. And it is massively bloated. So I've got another one of those on order. Hopefully it actually shows up, because the other, I ordered it once before and they basically didn't have it, so they had to refund my money. But then there's another tube that goes to this port here. So it comes out of the cooling jacket into the oil cooler, through the cooler, back into the head. And then the oil flows from this port to this port, or vice versa. I'm not sure what direction. Doesn't really matter. But behind here was all this either fuel or oil. I wasn't sure. So right at the bottom of the injection pump, there's this plate here. And they call it an elbow. And that elbow meets up with this tube right there. That tube has an O-ring here and an O-ring right there. And that is kind of like a compression. You just basically push it in, and then once it's all tightened up, it keeps, I think, fuel. But come to find out, and I don't know if this is totally the problem, but right there is a bolt that looks like it's been shaved down, made smaller, and then it's got two copper crush washers behind it, and it is loose. So if I just put the wrench on it, I can real easily turn it. Real easy. Like, it's not tight at all. So I don't know what this does or what this is for. So I'm going to take it out and we're going to look at it. Maybe, just maybe, this is a port into, I don't know if it's got oil or if there's fuel. I doubt there would be fuel that far over into the timing cover, but there might be oil. Oil might be getting flung up, hitting that bolt, whatever that bolt is, or plug, and then causing it to leak all over this area, which would be the best case scenario. Now, I did order, this little elbow comes off. Let's see, there's one bolt. I don't know how it comes off. Maybe it just has one bolt. I feel just one. There's one bolt way in the back. There's an O-ring on it. Like I said, O-ring here, O-ring there. We could take that out. I don't know. I'm just kind of chasing every little thing because it's the perfect time to start getting some of these oil leaks and these little tiny miscellaneous stuff done while I've got the tractor in the shop, rather than having something blow or have one of these coolant lines, you know, pop a hole in the field, and just way more work than having to do it right now. So I'm going to keep chasing this down. Let's pull out this plug thing, whatever it is, and we'll take a look at it. It looks like it is a custom, like somebody ground the head off of this bolt to make it so that you could actually fit the priming pump in as well. Doesn't look factory at all. All right, I got that all cleaned up. Got all the oil and grease all kind of gotten rid of. I don't see any active leaks currently, so it's definitely got to do something with while it's running. I took this bolt and it was kind of ground at an angle, so I flushed it up, just made it totally flush. And the reason they ground it was it can't actually get in here to install it unless it passes that mounting bolt right there for the primer pump. And so either they lost the correct one and just made this one work, I don't know. But this one goes in there, it works fine. I did find a new crush washer, and we're going to install this with some red Loctite. I don't want this coming out. I don't want to have to deal with this again. And I have no idea if this is even the problem, but it is a source of a leak. And they had two crush washers, which I've always been under the impression that having two crush washers can actually defeat the purpose. Unless you really crank them down, there's a potential for whatever you're trying to seal to leak past and between the washers. So we're just going to install one brand new one. Give that a good... Oh. Torqued. That ain't going anywhere. All right, so I do think to get this bottom elbow plate off, I have to take the injection pump out. We're not doing that right now. I did order the O-rings that go here, here, and then on the bottom of this plate, they were like $1 a piece. Actually, might have been less than that. But I was ordering some other stuff, and so got those coming. Might as well have them. Now what we're going to do, we're going to put it all back together. I don't have the replacement elbow for this yet. It hasn't come in, so we're just going to put this one back in. I want to run it. So we need to put it back together, run it, and see if we can find the active leak. Now that I got everything kind of clean, we should be able to see where it's dripping. I don't know if we're going to run it this second, but for now, we're done with that. Hopefully that is the leak. Between the injection pump seal that we replaced being a leak, I'm just trying to eliminate anything. So I'm going to button this back together, and then we're going to find something else to work on. All right, so this is the oil cooler, and I don't have a new replacement for this elbow here, but I do have a chunk of this hose. So got a new piece of this. I bought more than I needed directly from Cat. Just kind of trying to get all the oil and grease, all the junk off the outside of this. I do have new O-rings for this coming. I don't have those yet, but we're going to run it the way it is. I might pull them and flip them because sometimes what happens is the outside gets a little bit flat. So you can sometimes get a little bit more life out of an O-ring if you flip it. Sure won't hurt anything. So the oil flows in this port and out this port. And then there are copper tubes in here. And you can see them. See those? You can barely see those little holes. Those holes are copper tubes that the coolant runs through. So the coolant runs through this, and it pulls the heat out of the oil without the oil and the water mixing. And very basic oil cooler. This is a pretty dang small one. So this is actually for the engine oil. But simple little machine, simple little part, but kind of cool how it works. And I've had these go bad before, but I have no indication that this one's bad. But this hose here was so nasty and swollen that I was just worried at some point it was going to blow. Same thing with this one. I mean, when you look at how it should look new, and this is what it looks old, see how they just flare up and the rubber gets all bubbly? Eventually, it's going to pop. And I don't want it popping on me when we're out in the field. So we'll get this piece on there, and then we'll install this one for now. And once I get the replacement elbow, we'll get that put in. A little bit of a bear, but we're getting it in there. Here's that banjo bolt with the screen in it. Let's take that screen out. I think it threads in. Yeah, it does. Lots of junk in there. Look at all that. That's all rust from the tank, I'm thinking. Screen's in decent shape. So for anyone that needs to know, the screen is the bottom banjo bolt, not this bolt in the front, not this big cap here, and not this banjo bolt on top. Essentially, the screen is on the inlet side, which the inlet comes in the bottom, just like this. So you got your copper crush washer down there, that seals this surface. And then you got your copper crush washer on top, and that seals this surface. So I fully expect that screen to get plugged again. And because I expect that, what I might do, we might add an inline filter in, just one of those clear ones, just so we can keep an eye on what's coming out of the tank. I don't really want to have to cut open the tank, or I could probably get it pretty clean with a hot water pressure washer, but you just never get it perfect without cutting it open. Got it. I got it. All right. Oil cooler's back in. Priming pump's back in. Brand new Cat lower rad hose. Brand new Cat upper rad hose. I don't know if this is a thing or not, but I try not to leave the stickers on them because I don't know if it degrades the rubber over time. I could be very wrong, but it's just kind of a pet peeve. A little petroleum jelly to speed things up here. You gotta make sure you keep yourself quite lubed during certain activities. And one of them is when you put your hose on. Okay. There we go. All right. Brand new American-made stainless steel hose clamp with the full inner band. And what that means is none of the serrated, the little teethed gear portioned touches the hose. So on the inside, it's literally got a metal band that goes further so that you're not actually ruining whatever rubber you're squeezing on. I'm only using them because I've got them. There's our new upper one. And these are what I mean by hose clamps that have the metal all the way around. So there's a little protector that protects the location where these teeth are to keep it from biting into the rubber and ruining it. All right, last thing for tonight is this is a little breather boot that keeps water out of the engine. I've already got the filter. It's already been, it had it. But this one is cut, and I think it's largely cut because of those teeth on the hose clamp. So I got a brand new one. I think I got this from Cat. I think it's the only place I could get it, that I could find it. So we're going to stick that on there with one of those hose clamps that has the protector on the inside. I'll hook up the actual breather tube back up later. Still have to take the valve cover off and put the valve cover gasket, a few other things. All right, let's pop off this exhaust manifold. I want to see, because we've got some leaking going on. At this very first cylinder, that exhaust manifold gasket is leaking. So I bought a new one. I don't know if we need it. It was like cheap, like 10 or 15 bucks. So let's take that off and we'll see what we see. Oh man, that bolt was loose. Maybe that's the problem. Definitely could be part of it. I'm taking it off anyway. Gasket doesn't look too bad. All the bolts came out nicely. There is absolutely quite a bit of carbon buildup coming out of those cylinders, but they are all pretty heavily gunked up with oil and grease. You can see there's a pretty good chunk of it right there in that cylinder. Same with here. See that? Definitely some wet stacking coming out of that one, for sure. See all that build up? Yeah. So I'm gonna get a vacuum and a little scraper. We're gonna scrape all this, try and get as much of it out as we can. I might even put a torch inside this exhaust manifold and try and burn out any of the remaining. And then I don't know what to do with the actual exhaust, you know, the muffler itself. We're going to have to weld a new collar on it, but I don't know if we'll be able to get all of the actual residual out of it or not. But I don't have a lot of experience with machines that have wet stacked, so if you have any experience and you know what is causing this, is it that the valves aren't sealing all the well? Is it that this machine has just done a lot of idling and not a lot of actual hard working? I think it's some of that, yes, but I don't know. Let me know your thoughts. I'm curious. All right, looking in these exhaust ports, they're a heck of a lot cleaner. I went in there with a screwdriver and a scraper, and then I used a vacuum and sucked it all out. I turned the engine over on this first one so that none of it would drop down in the cylinder. I really do believe this machine just needs to be run hard, full throttle for a day, you know, to really clear out all this buildup. All right, so here's our new gasket, and as you can see, this is the stock one. It's got metal this thick between each of the exhaust ports. So I took the old one and I cut the notch out. And part of the reason is because every one of these was full of oil, grease, dirt, debris that couldn't fall. And I just don't want that sitting there. I want it to have an escape. And so I don't see any reason why I couldn't do that to the brand new one. I did it to the old one just because it's the old one. I'm not going to reuse it. So I don't really see a downside to doing this to the new one. It'll make it less rigid, but it really isn't going to matter. Once it's on the exhaust manifold here and bolted through, it doesn't need the rigidity. So I kind of want to cut the new one, because as you can see, this is what it would look like. It's got like 1.5 inches of basically area to catch stuff right there in the head. And it was completely full to there, as you saw. And even in the whatever this was repainted, it never got painted there because they probably never even took the exhaust manifold off. But I don't see a downside to that. I think I'm just going to go ahead and do it. Beautiful. All right, I went out and cleaned out the exhaust manifold. Cleaned off the faces, got all the black tar out of there. All right, new valve cover gasket. When I initially took this apart, I cleaned out this whole valve cover and actually cleaned up this gasket as best I could. But a new one was cheap enough that it was worth getting. Did I get the wrong one? I don't think this is right. No, it's missing a hole there and here. No, it's not right. Dang it. Yeah, it's missing a hole right there and right here, and the zigzag is off. Oh well. That piece is disconnected from the muffler. So there was a ton of smoke coming out of the engine bay. Looks like it literally melted off. got to digging through my exhaust parts and I found a bunch of like cutoffs of exhaust pipe. This one probably would be the best because I might be able to die grind this out and get it to seat down in there. Problem is, this stuff is so thin. I don't want to deal with thin. So, and that's probably why this failed. And this is actually thicker than this, the original piece. Well, I wouldn't call it original. I think somebody fixed it. I was digging through my stash and I found this 1/8 inch thick pipe that beautifully fits right down in there. So we're going to weld it all the way around, probably drop it down like 1 inch, and maybe come up a little taller than normal, mainly because that'll help draw the exhaust and the hot air out of the engine bay up the stack. So the hood has its own little stack built into it, and then you put the exhaust pipe on top of that. So whatever we weld here has to be short enough to basically be under the hood, but I want it as tall as we can to kind of really push that exhaust up and out. Alright, I got a couple tiny little holes that have either been punctured or worn through. This one looks like it's been worn through. That one potentially punctured, could be worn through. That's kind of a puncture, but it hasn't gone through. At some point, maybe the whole blade needs reskinned, but for now, I just want to keep water and as much debris out of there as I can. So we're just going to throw some weld on it. And I am blowing through. I'm going to turn the heat down. There we go. I'll grind that down in a bit. Let's get this one done. All right, there we go. Got that welded up and ground smooth. I filled in this big divot. There was actually one there and one there. I just filled it with metal, smoothed it out, filled that hole, and then there was a little divot there. There's another one there, and there's a bunch in the middle, but way better than it was before. Obviously, these are tiny little holes. I'm not too worried about it. Another thing I've been working on is fixing little things. Like, for instance, this was broken and was just kind of folded in. So I got that welded back on. There was a broken bolt there. I chopped off the nut and welded a new one on the back. So we've got good threads there. Same here. Same here. And then this one had a broken bolt in it. I ended up getting it out, but this tab broke off, so I had to weld that back on. And then same with that bolt there. That one had basically a bad stud in it. Cut it off, welded a new nut there. Yeah, lots of tedious stuff. Just the little things, kind of trying to make the covers fit right and work the way they should. Yeah, we're making progress. And the exhaust. So here's the exhaust. It turned out really nice. So this basically 1/8 inch thick pipe. I ran 3 passes all the way around. It might be too tall. I don't know. So we've got 6 inches sticking out and 1 inch in. So I made a 7-inch pipe. It is way better than what it was. And hopefully we can get all the exhaust up and out and not all over inside the engine bay. Because if I'll show you the hood, here's the underside of the hood. So the underside of the hood is just completely caked in soot. And that is the hole where the exhaust pipe will feed up through, and then you put the taller exhaust pipe on the outside. But it should be the solution to basically getting rid of all that now that we have the muffler fixed. So yeah, just ticking away. All right, I opened up this, basically the clutch housing, and see this line, this little brake line? So this puts brake pressure to this cylinder, which pushes on this arm to extend it to pull and release the clutch. So I guess it's not brake pressure so much as just like a hydraulic pressure. Well, right there was a pretty decent bubble, rust bubble. And quite literally since I saw that, I've worried about it popping. And I think with good reason, because I kind of scratched at it, and I'm pretty sure we're real thin right there. So I went ahead and bought a new one, because, well, I don't want that popping on me while I'm running it at some point. So we're gonna throw that in there. And boy, that's about to break right there. There it goes. I'm just gonna twist right off. Okay. There we go. And I already got this one loose. Yeah, at some point that would have peeled right open on me. I don't see any snap rings, and so it might just be captured by the pressure it puts on this rod, so it can never push all the way out. So I'm thinking this whole cylinder comes out. Just can't get a grip on it without damaging the chrome. So I think I can get this. It spreads out. Yeah, that fits down there. And then we'll take the slide hammer. So based on the diagram in the parts manual, it looks like there's a spring down there, a rear plug, and the seal's got to be there. So I think it just comes right out. So we're going to go with that. There we go. There's our spring. Seal doesn't look terrible. We're going to replace it anyway. There's the seal, the outer ring, and yeah, there's an O-ring under it. It's in pretty nice shape. No real scratches in there in the bore, other than the surface rust on the outside. Good deal. All right, I'm gonna get this all cleaned up and then we'll put it all back together. Here's the new seal, essentially an O-ring and an outer ring. So the O-ring just pops in first. And I'm pretty sure that it doesn't matter which way on this. Just like that. Beautiful. Nice! Alright, that was easy. This just sits like that when we go put it together. I'm going to clean this up real quick on the wear wheel. We're going to slam this back together. Now I have confidence in this. New O-rings. Alright, I got the end on the block end. This end, probably gotta cut it right about there. I think I need to cut a little bit off of the top too. Okay, got it all in there. There's our new tube. I'm pretty confident we got the oil leak fixed in this corner, but we'll find out once we run it. And I know we didn't get that one fixed because it's still leaking. So we're gonna jump over onto something else though. For now, I think that's buttoned up as best as I can do it with what I've got. All right, I've got a new water temp gauge and I got a new oil gauge for the converter. So we're gonna get these swapped out real quick. I've already got the thermostat portion pulled out. So I've never actually fixed one of these water temp gauges. I know that there's a procedure. You basically use salt water, icy salt water, and you stick the end of one of these basically cathodes or anodes or whatever the heck it's called into that, and you can replace the end of one of these gauges. The gauge is probably fine, but what happens is it leaks out the whatever, I can't remember, ether I think it is. I think they put ether in it, and then it no longer is able to read correctly. So I'd love to save some of these old gauges and replace them. I've just never done that before. Is it hard to do? Have you guys ever done that before? I know it's cheap enough to just replace it, but I don't know. Sometimes I like fixing stuff. But this time around, we're not gonna mess. Let's see. That's the water. So we'll go through there, and then we're gonna go through the firewall here. And then basically it just goes right in here. All right, check it out. We got a new water temp gauge and a new converter oil temp gauge installed. Looking fancy. So I literally drove it to right there and it died again. We definitely have a fuel issue. I think it's the tank is clogged or it has a bunch of crap in it that needs to be cleaned out. Well, I hope you enjoyed all the progress we've made on the baby Dozer. Got a handful of things to do that are still not done, but as with projects like this, sometimes it's the little things that take so much time to get finished up. And I think the plan is going to be to paint this one. Well, you'll have to let me know your thoughts on the color, but as always, I truly appreciate your support. Thanks for watching Salvage Workshop, and I'll be back on this very soon. You guys have a great one.